Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, The Great Shift for Learning, Growth in the Flow of Work. Our speakers today are Josh Bersin, Global Industry Analysis and CEO, The Josh Bersin Company, Nahal Najin, Director of Research, Josh Bersin Company, and Joe Whittinghill, Corporate Vice President, Talent, Learning, and Insight, Microsoft. A special thanks to our sponsors of today's webinar, Loom Apps. Loom Apps aligns the modern enterprise workforce through better communication, engagement, organization, and work. The company's leading intranet and employee experience platform intelligently connects people, information, and applications to deepen business relationship and grow institutional knowledge and productivity. Available across devices and languages, Loom Apps is an open, multi-talent platform built for enterprise scale and flexibility. Loom Apps is counted on by over 4 million users spanning the world's top enterprises from Airbus to Zendesk. With that, I would like to pass it over to Josh Bersin. Josh, you have the floor.
Let me welcome you all and just tell you you're going to be in for a really wonderful hour. Nahal is going to talk to you about the research we just did on learning and growth and careers, and then Joe Whittinghill, the head of talent at Microsoft, is going to tell you. So we're going to have an interesting conversation about what Microsoft is doing in this whole area, but let me give you a little context. So, for those of you that keep watching the press like I do, every month the job market gets tighter. Even though the Fed has raised interest rates, the stock market has somewhat collapsed, many asset prices have dropped. There are more jobs being created than we have ever seen. The United States unemployment rate is a 50-year low, 3.5%. I have an article on my website that shows you that Australia has a massive shortage of talent. Germany has the greatest shortage of talent they've ever had. The UK, 45% of companies can't find the right people. Country after country is finding this. And the reason for this is because of two things. First, the fertility rate has dropped, and so there aren't as many people entering the workforce, so the size of the workforce is static or shrinking in most countries. But the second is the massive amount of transformation and new jobs and new roles being created in every company. So when you look at that environment that we live in, despite the fact that the economy has slowed down a lot, you have to reflect on the fact that the only way you're going to maintain your company's strength is through growth, through development, through careers, through internal mobility. Well, Nahal Nanja, who's our research director in our company and leads our research on learning and leadership, just finished a massive study on this, which actually points to this as a critical priority for learning and development and HR and talent and business in general. So let me turn it over to Nahal. She's going to take you through the research, talk to you about the findings, and then in about half an hour, we're going to open it up to Joe, and the three of us are going to have a conversation about what's going on at Microsoft. Okay, Nahal, over to you.
Josh, hi everyone. I'm excited to be talking about our brand new research. So I'll take about 20 minutes to go over key findings from our brand new research on corporate learning. We'll then transition into a conversation with Joe Whittinghill for some real-world examples around how Microsoft operationalizes growth through learning and careers. We will reserve time for Q&A, so let's get started. But before that, Josh, I'm going to turn it back to you for just a minute or so to really talk about the evolution and set the context for where we were, how far we've come,
Sure.
and then I'll talk about what's next and what we saw in our research.
Yeah, so I just, we're in the middle of putting together a big super class on this. So, the learning industry is about a $320 billion industry, the corporate learning industry, not even the academic and professional development outside of corporations. And so it's been around a long time. But relative to other spending on payroll and facilities and equipment, it's really pretty small. It's a pretty small piece of the corporate budget. In the early 2000s, it was revolutionized by the internet, and I was very involved in that. And most of us went out there and bought learning management systems and a lot of the focus on L&D for at least 5 or 6 years was centralization and infrastructure, and then taking all these learning programs we were building in companies and aligning them towards talent strategies, or what we used to call integrated talent management. And a lot of you, I'm sure, have been very involved in that. And we ran into all sorts of challenges with competency models and trying to find an efficient way to do that. And along came, Apple, which basically said, this device changed corporate learning, because what Apple basically did is they said, we're doing away with Flash. We're going to give every person in the world access to a video camera. And by the way, while we're doing this, YouTube opened up the video production and distribution system, and everybody started creating videos on everything. And the next thing you knew, none of our employees were going to our learning management systems. They were going to YouTube. And along came lynda.com and later Udacity and Udemy and many of these content companies. And all of a sudden our employees said, hey, I don't want to go to this funky old system we have inside the company to look at this compliance training unless I have to. I'm just going to go find things I need. So we really rebuilt a lot of our learning infrastructure around digital delivery of content, many forms of content, micro-learning, and I started this whole discussion of what I called learning in the flow of work. Do you need small amount of learning? Do you need large amount of learning? Do you need both? Do you need collaboration? How does that all fit together? And that was going fine, and then along comes the pandemic, and we sent everybody home, and the job market got incredibly competitive, and we realized that it was really about skills and capabilities, not just learning. And we needed to figure out what skills we have and what skills we need and what skills our competitors have and what skills we don't know that we need. And that's where most of you are today, is in this new world. But it's even more than that, and that's what Nihal is going to talk about. And she'll show you through research. We didn't make this up. This isn't just us sitting around dreaming things up here. We got this through some statistical analysis, and you'll see what's next. Okay, Nihal, how's that for a setup?
Fantastic, Josh. Thank you. All right. So we surveyed over 1,000 organizations. We've studied 94 L&D practices across 9 broad areas that you can see on my screen. Now, the blue bars that you see below each of these areas, those are the percentage of organizations that told us they're doing really well in each of these areas, and that's about 20% on average. So the good news is 1 out of 5 organizations today are doing really well in each of these areas, and they're leveraging the right learning strategies to differentiate outcomes and win the war for talent. But on the flip side, 4 out of 5 organizations are lagging in most areas of L&D, and we recognize that compared to any other domain in HR, L&D functions today have leaped years ahead on the reinvention journey. So to think of it, L&D professionals today, they're trying new approaches, adapting to remote work models, setting up digital academies, they're buying new tools, licensing new content, they're building skills taxonomies, they're experimenting with VR and AR programs. They're moving faster than ever. But the domain itself is changing so fast that L&D functions are struggling to keep up. So one of our goals with this research was to identify what does L&D need to do to catch up. So when we studied these 94 practices within the scope of our research, we also correlated these practices with talent, business, and innovation outcomes to identify which specific practices have the strongest impact on driving outcomes for the business. And these are the top 15 most impactful L&D practices. These practices, in fact, were the eureka moment for us because they crystallized for us where L&D is at today and exactly where it needs to be. So I know there's a lot of text on my screen and it's hard to read, but I'll walk you through the themes in just a second. If you look closely, the number 1 most impactful L&D practice today is creating extensive career growth options. But also, 5 out of the 15 most impactful practices have to do with career management. 4 have to do with leadership development, coaching, mentoring, forward learning in the flow, and 2 have to do with L&D capabilities and technologies. So the story that we saw loud and clear is that we're seeing a big shift towards the outcomes of L&D. What matters most is what people want from L&D. Today, a third of the workforce is leaving their jobs every year, and they're leaving in pursuit of better jobs, better careers, better lives. People want to grow. They want to grow in their careers, they want to grow as leaders, and they want to develop the skills and capabilities that can help them get to where they want to be. Learning has the power and the responsibility to make people grow. So what we see is most organizations haven't been able to make that connection. What is missing in L&D today is the connection between learning and growth. Organizations today need to orchestrate the shift from a culture of learning to a culture of growth because employees want to grow. Learning can help them develop the skills they need to grow, but if you don't create the opportunities for them to grow, they will find those opportunities elsewhere outside your organization. Ultimately, growth is what matters the most, and enabling growth in the flow of work is L&D's new mission. With that, let's take a look next at the maturity model, which is essentially a roadmap for organizations to understand what the shift looks like and also assess where you are in the journey and how far you need to grow. That is our maturity model. So we saw in our research that organizations fall into 4 different levels of maturity depending on the L&D practices they deploy. Level 1 are organizations with the least effective practices and outcomes, and level 4 are organizations that have world-class learning practices and superior talent, business, and innovation outcomes. And we saw very clear themes around the L&D practices of organizations at each of these levels of maturity. So I'll take you through those one by one. Level 1 is what we call programmatic training. At this level, learning departments operate in a silo. They're focused on delivering mandatory, compliance-focused, and episodic or programmatic training. The focus is on delivering point-in-time training rather than enduring learning. At level 2, the shift starts to happen from training to learning, and the scope of learning increases to broader topics and to broader audiences. So organizations start building new content and designing new programs to integrate with the talent strategy and across all talent touchpoints. They also start buying new content to make learning accessible at scale. They invest in vendor libraries, and they start focusing energies on learning discovery or the LXP with the goal that every employee should have access to the learning they need. So we call this level self-directed learning. Now, if you look at the percentages of organizations at these 2 levels, that adds up to about 75%. So that is where most organizations are at, and the jump to level 3 is the hardest for any organization. At level 3, organizations take the self-directed learning infrastructure and they go deeper. So they integrate the wide range of self-development assets into journeys, career paths, and specific skills development solutions. They establish functional capability academies to build capabilities that are critical for the business and for people to advance in their career paths. CEMEX, for example, has a safety academy. Capital One has built a cloud engineering academy, and Intel is developing its own AI academy. Level 3 is actually a fantastic level to be at because at this level, organizations truly support learning. They build leaders at every level and they tailor development for each individual. What is missing at this level, though, is that the connection between learning and career growth still isn't fully crystallized. Level 4 is the North Star, where learning translates into career growth. At this level, organizations don't just leave it at you own your career, but they facilitate career growth. They create formalized pathways for people to move from low-value, low-demand careers to high-value, high-demand careers. And these pathways include specific steps, including education and upskilling for people to move into those careers. Walmart, for example, has built career pathways to move frontline store associates into cybersecurity roles. Now, to identify what skills will be most critical in the future and what roles will be high value and high demand, these organizations leverage systems of talent intelligence, and they help their workforce build those skills while building critical talent for their future needs. These organizations also set up talent marketplaces so that individuals don't just consume learning content, but they can experience new domains quickly and freely through gigs, projects, internal mobility, coaching, and mentoring opportunities. At this level, employees still own their careers, but the company operationalizes how employees can get to where they want to be. These organizations leverage the power of learning to facilitate growth in the flow of work. And as you can see on my screen, there's only about 11% of organizations that are at this level of maturity. But these organizations have significantly superior talent, business, and innovation outcomes to an extent that these organizations are almost 30 times more likely to be great places to work, and that is the highest multiplier we've seen across any of the other talent areas we've studied so far. So we spoke about what good looks like today. Let's now talk about how organizations can get there. We identified 7 big findings where we talk about what is it that L&D functions need to do to catch up and what actions they can take to get ahead of the curve. And these are our 7 key findings. I'll give you maybe just about 10 seconds to glance through, and then I'll dive into these one by one. And because I'm getting impatient, I'm going to go ahead. Let's go. The first finding is what we've been speaking about. What matters most in L&D today is a focus on enabling growth in the flow of work. So what does that mean? There are 3 pieces here: capabilities, career growth, and leadership development. First of all the information and training that L&D delivers must fit together into a bigger capability model, which is something that L&D and the business together should design. You need to consider capabilities that can help your organization thrive today as well as in the future. But it is important to offer learning in the flow of work first, because that is how people will learn. Now, to define future capabilities, you need to cultivate a strong understanding of the strategy of the business and the work that needs to be delivered. It is not enough to just understand capabilities inside your company. It's also important to see what skills are outside in the market, and that is where talent intelligence solutions like Eightfold, Sensia, MZ Burning Glass, and SkyHive can give you that visibility. Next, every L&D program, resource, and offering should be relevant and timely to each employee's needs, and it should support their growth and career development. So you need to integrate learning into career paths so that individuals are aware of and can develop specific skills needed to advance in their careers. You also need to create formalized career pathways. That is something I'll talk about in the next finding. And most importantly, L&D must play an active role in facilitating internal mobility. Rocket Central, for example, they have a team called Thrive Coaches that sits within L&D. This team offers personalized guidance and coaching to match team members' interests and aspirations with the right internal job opportunities. And then this team points them to programs and resources through which they can develop the skills they need to thrive into those new jobs. Finally, organizations need to build leaders and develop leadership capabilities at all levels, because when you do that, you give employees the opportunity to grow as leaders, and you also help them develop the capabilities through which they can help other people grow. An important piece here is that as you think of creating these growth opportunities, you also need to democratize access to growth opportunities, and talent marketplaces are a way to make that happen. A talent marketplace is a place where an employee can go in to find learning opportunities, job opportunities, projects, gigs, or mentors aligned with their areas of interest without having to go through hierarchical approvals. Talent marketplace vendors like Gloat, Phenom, PeopleFluent, Eightfold, Fuel50, they can enable this by matching people with opportunities, and several leading companies like Nestle, Bank of America, HSBC, Truist, and Seagate use talent marketplaces to help their employees grow their skills and careers. And the second finding is about career pathways. First off, career pathways are not career paths where people move within a cluster of jobs using their existing skills. Career pathways are non-linear growth paths that help an individual develop new skills and take an employee to a new profession, a new industry, or a new role family. They show an individual how to move from low value, low demand careers or declining roles to a more valued and in demand career. And these include a series of clearly defined steps, including education and upskilling to help people advance into those roles. For example, a laundry service employee in a hospital could start as a bedside aide or nurse assistant, continue to develop expertise and get the right certifications to become a registered nurse. And when they reach a high level of skill proficiency as a nurse, they can grow into the role of a nursing manager. Bon Secours Mercy Health has created several such pathways for its healthcare workers. These career pathways are the new future of L&D. They must be designed based on adjacent skills, an understanding of the regulations and certification standards of each role, and a set of developmental assignments and stretch roles. They should be focused on where the company needs new talent and also incorporate each individual's interests and aspirations. That brings us to the third finding, which is about content development. In today's world, employees want relevance and timeliness first. They want in-depth instruction second. So they want something that feels immediately useful. What this means is you need to focus a lot of work on skills-based taxonomies, micro-learning, case studies, and simulations, and lots of short videos and mini courses. Also, it means not just building or buying content, but organizing content around critical functional capabilities and around experiences that support the application of learning through knowledge sharing, developmental assignments, and communities, which is what we refer to as capability academies. Ericsson, for example, has built an entire 5G academy for its sales and engineering teams. The Josh Bersin Academy is an example of a capability academy for HR professionals, and you'll see several other examples of capability academies on my screen. This finding also touches on the need for a data architecture to make sense of what content is the right content based on what's being consumed, which is where the LRS can help you. And also AI-based solutions like content intelligence that can read and analyze content inside the content, meaning analyzing text and words inside each content item to assess which content is the most relevant and applicable content for your organization. AstraZeneca, for example, they use a content intelligence solution called Filtered to identify which content libraries are most useful and relevant for its learners, and they use that information to make procurement decisions. The next finding is about the need for an integrated skills strategy. Essentially, what that means is you need to identify and align with business leaders on what are the skills needed to thrive, and then prioritize developing those skills. And once you identify these skills, we recommend also adding a capability framework on top of these skills where capabilities are broader and more relevant to your organization. And also, when you start on a skills project, we do recommend that instead of making it a humongous multi-year project focused on the entire organization at once, approach the project in pieces. Focus on few most critical needs at a time. For example, think about a function that is underperforming or a new skill that will be very critical in the future or where there is a current gap in your organization, or specific skill development needs if your industry is likely to go through a massive transformation, for example. Building a skills strategy is an important and ongoing discipline. L&D needs to be prepared to do this year after year, and L&D needs to engage with designated business leaders or experts who will shepherd this process year after year. All right, the next finding is about L&D capabilities. Essentially, L&D today is tasked with building capabilities across the organization, and to do that, they first need to start with building and strengthening their own capabilities. So, what are the most important L&D capabilities? Enabling learning in the flow of work is table stakes because, as I said before, that's how people learn. But also, L&D teams need to practice agile iterative design. They need to understand business and stakeholder needs And they need to understand what all the data that exists in learning is telling them about learners' needs. They must embrace new media and tools, and they must also understand technology. In fact, understanding, experimenting with, and adopting new L&D technologies is not just a nice to do, but a must do for L&D, because of all the L&D capabilities that we studied, experimenting with new learning technologies and approaches is the most impactful L&D capability today. Number 6, so how L&D operates matters more than how the function is organized. We saw in our research that some companies have very centralized L&D teams, some are highly distributed, but no single operating model stands out as the best. What we see is the world's best companies are federated, and they balance the benefits of both centralized and decentralized models. They operate as an integrated unit, and they're highly coordinated. They work together on large programs like leadership development, onboarding, management excellence, well-being. And then they focus on local programs for sales, customer service, or manufacturing using design thinking and standard tools to scale. The global CLO takes on the role of an orchestrator and leader, assigning leadership to functional or geographic L&D areas which are most strategic each year. We see that mature organizations don't focus on a perfect model, but the right model for their learning environment. It is about best fit for purpose, strategy before structure, operating, making decisions, and delivering solutions closer to the business and learners. And that brings us to the last finding, which is about L&D technologies. We saw in our research that all this innovation that is hitting the L&D tech industry faster than ever before seems to have created this big blur for organizations, and it is this whole mystery that organizations need to demystify. Our research shows that high-powered L&D teams, they innovate and they experiment with technology. They have a long-term platform roadmap. They constantly refresh their tech infrastructure to keep it simple, clean, and easy to use. They focus on building a strong data architecture so that they can measure what is working, what is not working, and what audiences and groups are developing the best. And these companies embrace innovation. They do not get overwhelmed by innovation or carried away by every shiny new tool. They adopt what ties with their learning strategy and what delivers the end user employee experience that they want to deliver. We also acknowledge that navigating this complex L&D tech landscape is very hard, but it is essential. We've identified specific steps organizations can follow to navigate this landscape. You can see those on my screen. And the most important criteria in all of these steps is you need to be very clear and intentional about the problems you are trying to solve, and you need to focus on the end user employee experience you want to deliver. So that was a fast track through our 7 findings. And to bring it home, before I turn it over to Josh and Joe, very quickly, key takeaways. If organizations want L&D to build capabilities across the organization, they first need to invest in building capabilities in the L&D function. Then identify critical business capabilities that will support long-term careers for employees and long-term talent needs for the business. Support the development of those critical future capabilities, also support the development of leadership capabilities across the organization. And finally, illuminate clear pathways for how people can apply their existing and newly acquired skills and capabilities to grow their careers inside the organization. Ultimately, growth is what matters the most. If you don't focus on career growth, everything else you do in learning doesn't matter, because when people leave, they take their skills with them. With that, that's a wrap on what I wanted to present. And now let me turn it over to you again, Josh.
Thank you. Thank you, Nahal. That was absolutely fantastic. And for those of you that are following as close as you can, there was obviously a lot of material there. This research is done in the form of questions and assessments to thousands of companies. So if you are scratching your head trying to figure out where your company is in the maturity model and what you could be doing differently, just let us know and we will take you through the assessment and you can see where you are. So now let me introduce the second star of our show, Joe Whittinghill. Joe, are you there?
I'm here.
So Joe, I don't know how long I've known Joe, it's 15 years or 20 years or something. Joe has had a lot of senior roles at Microsoft. He's been involved in the HR learning talent career strategy at Microsoft for a long time. Why don't you introduce yourself just a little bit to people and they can get a sense of what you do. And then I want you to tell us the journey you've been through from learning to careers at Microsoft, and then we'll ask you some questions.
Great. Well, thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. I look after global talent management, learning and development, organization development and culture, and our people strategy. So I'm one of the centers of excellence people, or centers of execution, we're now starting to call them. And I've had a career both in HR, I'm an OD professional really by background, and also I spent 10 years in finance doing mergers and acquisitions. And so when Satya became CEO and Kathleen Hogan became our new CHRO, they asked me if I'd come over and do this job. And really the key focus at that point was our organizational transformation and the culture journey we've been on, coupled with all the other things that we're working on, which includes things like this month is Career Month at Microsoft. So this is a very timely conversation for sure.
Great. So, we talked the other day and you told me all about the career strategy, and you've learned a lot, obviously, of lots and lots of jobs and roles and changing organizations and mergers and acquisitions. Maybe what does career development mean at Microsoft, and how do you facilitate it in the new model, and then we'll talk a little about some of the tools you use and the process.
Sure. So we stepped back, and I love that integrated view that you're all showing, Josh and team, because we do think that is the real answer now, is that the line between learning and talent management and career are really all one, and making those things work for the employees. And quite frankly, just create one of our leadership principles is creating clarity. And so we're trying to create clarity for people. And we stepped back and we said, we don't have a real easy way to discuss careers. And so we came out with a framework called Discover, Connect, and Grow. And the Discover part, it may be about the individual, though it is definitely not just about finding a new job. And it's really opening that aperture for employees to understand that sometimes just a stretch assignment, could be 3 weeks, it could be 3 months, is going to be as beneficial to you as maybe switching jobs. So go out and discover what's out there. And also it relates to building their network, because we are a firm believer that the larger your network is, the better your overall career can be over time, both just from getting work done, but also knowing what the opportunities out there. And that gets into the connect piece. And we spend a lot of time, especially now with the pandemic and coming out of it, reminding employees to connect. We're going to have our North American Discover Day. It's virtual. There will be 30,000 people participating in that event, and it's one of our biggest and highest valued events. Last month, we went through our hackathons and had over 80,000 people participate in those. And you would all be surprised at the amount of innovation you see in our products and services that actually came out of the hackathons is quite stunning, and including a lot of the Xbox stuff and a lot of our adaptable controllers and things like that. And then Grow, I think you all are hitting it on the head, is that it's moving away from this idea that you're going to be on a singular path. But it may, it's probably an easier metaphor and visual to say, sure, you're on a career journey and it maybe looks like a path, but it's understanding you may take some hard turns left or right, just like I did, where I left and went to finance. I did not expect to be over there for a decade. And I definitely didn't expect to be running the whole group that I ended up running, because I ended up running the entire integration practice for the company. But it was a great career experience for me. And what Satya and Kathleen would tell you, it's one of the reasons I'm in this job as a personal example, is because of those experiences and seeing literally hundreds of companies that we looked at. We ended up buying about 140 while I was in that role. And so it's all those leadership teams, all those org models. But for today's conversation, it's reminding people that, sure, job switch is important, promotion is important, but it's really gathering experiences that are going to supercharge your career.
One of the things we talked about the other day was valuing and really honoring the importance of a horizontal move as opposed to an upward move. How have you dealt with that issue in the culture?
Yeah. This is where we try to get real clear with early in career, they want to be able to say they were promoted. We get it. And so when you're earlier in career, we probably promote them a little more rapidly. But we explain as you move up and start to get into the more middle of your career, it isn't about necessarily promotion. You can get paid more on a lateral move. But, moving up by a level shouldn't be the aim. The aim should be, can you move to a job that is different than the one you have today? Maybe it's adjacent with adjacent skills, or it could be a big switch. We're seeing a lot more of our engineers, like our software developers, want to go work in sales for a while to get super close to the customer, really understand the pain that we put them in. And then when they come back to be engineers again, they are much better engineers, much more empathetic, and what we refer to as a lot more customer obsessed.
And the engineering culture, they don't mind having salespeople coming back into engineering, and
we have gotten much better.
I know that's usually the problem. Going one way is easy, but going the other way.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like trying to break into HR at times, right?
Yeah.
You have to make sure you don't reject all the good people that could be working with you.
So, one of the things I talk to companies about this all the time, and sometimes companies think if they buy a talent marketplace and they turn it on, this is going to magically, just like pixie dust, it's all going to start happening. But there's many, many cultural things, plus the fact that, at least in most big companies, the manager that you work for doesn't know the opportunities that are available to you. How do you, in Microsoft, open this up and get this to take, because you don't even have, I don't know, I guess you kind of have a talent marketplace, but I'm not sure you've totally, gone that direction. How have you facilitated this in the management and the culture and the behaviors?
Yeah, so let me this will be a slightly longer answer. So First of all, you do have to start with, and we're refreshing ours right now, just what are your principles about talent? And making sure those principles really are edgy and pointy enough that it forces decisions. And an example of a principle would be is that talent is a company asset, not a business asset, with the idea that people should be able to move across businesses freely and not run into a lot of barriers to do that. Another principle, as an example, would be, in all seriousness, we're not going to save everyone. So for a long time, we always didn't want people to leave the company, and we're getting more sober about the fact that maybe the best thing is for them to go try out a different company for a while. But we want to then have a respectful process as they're leaving, because the number of boomerangs, we call them here, that we are hiring back into the company is quite stunning. And guess what? They are skilled up. They're a lot smarter by working somewhere else. And we're happy to have them back. So that membrane we've really opened up as well. The technical part of it is we really believe, and we've just finished it, you have to start with the work, because where we've seen these talent market, and we actually don't sell one, just for the record for everybody, maybe yet. We don't sell one yet. But we really haven't deployed one because we've been working on something slightly different, and that is this project called Talent Architecture, where we went through an excruciating amount of work to fundamentally define what we refer to as every discipline. Other people would know it probably as a job. Some people call it discipline, some people call it a job family, but we call it profession, and underneath that is disciplines. And we ended up with a lot more than I thought we would. We also figured out that we have a lot of full-time employees who are doing jobs that we knew very little about, and we now understand those better, which was kind of cool. But once you can take that description of the work and the integer, I liked your categorization of capabilities and then underneath that skills, because we do think skills are probably the new currency. We've moved away from competencies and really defining carefully each skill. So we can show you what are the top 5, top 12 skills for every role we have in the company, the proficiency level of those skills, so that people can then look at that. And then folks who are looking to make a career shift, you will also have people that say, hey, I want to work in marketing. And so you'll see people either in engineering or sales go to marketing. They can really understand what those jobs are, let alone the technology shifts that people will make. But it takes a long time. But the beauty of defining the work is then you can associate that with the humans as well. And the big unlock, we're really convinced, is this marrying of all the employee data that is locked in all those tools you just showed us, and getting that data and bump it up against the work, and then let the matching algorithms have their time at it to, recommend to people a learning opportunity. Maybe it's a short-term assignment. Maybe it is switching jobs. Maybe it's finding a mentor. And so we think that that's where the AI is really going to supercharge everything here. But if you haven't done the work to get really clear on what the work is, it's going to be harder for those systems to actually operate.
Well, no, it's true. I mean, with the effort you put in creating a taxonomy like that, everything else kind of gets a little bit easier. One of the things you talked to me about that I want you to share is this career check-in process. And teaching managers how to check in with employees, how to get employees to think about their careers, to take time on it. How does that work? Tell us a little bit about how that came to be and how that works.
Sure. So as we were starting the career work, we wanted to get more curious than we had been about what is some of the best ways to lock in. So your stat, it does not surprise me that career was at the top of the stack. Mm-hmm. And for our employee base, it's the number one satisfier and dissatisfier at the same time. And so we said, well, we should probably get better at this. This is where the Discover, Connect, and Grow framework came as a way to have a conversation between an employee and a manager, and an employee to come up with their own self-assessment of what they want to do. But from there, we then stepped back and had a really rich debate about, does career go with performance management or separate it? And we landed that it's separate. And a lot of people in the room are on the call are rolling their eyes saying, yeah, we did that like 10 years ago. You guys are a little late to the party. But we understand that getting career management and career development more closely aligned with growth and learning was the way to go. And then this idea of a career check-in, while performance is on a regular annual calendar, the check-in can happen at any time. And so that was another big unlock of saying, hey, employee, you can initiate. Your manager doesn't have to do it, and say, I want to have a career conversation. And then we trained the managers about how to use the tools we now have in place with our role library. Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't always have to be a technology solution. Believe it or not, our career development forum right now is a SharePoint site that we have people work through, because we a lot of times like to pilot versus turn on a tool. And so the employees love this thing because it takes them through, it takes a while, to be quite honest, a step-by-step process to get really clear about what do they want to do with their career, what learning would they like to have, what experiences, because other people say, hey, I want to work across different technology spaces, or maybe go move to a foreign country. And putting all that together, we said, well, let's just do it in SharePoint first and get all that data, and then we can figure out if we want to, an internal career marketplace, which we do. It has been one of the biggest successes we've had, and it's so simple, but here is something fascinating, and we didn't do slides today, but we learned it's when people go to their class reunions, the holidays happen, they have a birthday or their service anniversary, that's when you go talk to the employee about their career, because they are getting a little loose in the socket. And so part of the recommendation engines, as we get into this, it'll prompt the manager and say, hey, the person's birthday or their career service anniversary is coming up. It might be a good time to check in with your employee and see how they're thinking about their career.
Well, I just can't reinforce that enough. That is such an important process. It's left out of integrated talent management, by the way. We used to have development plans at the bottom of the performance appraisal form, but those were kind of worthless. So, in the context of this career conversation that has to happen, let's suppose I'm a manager, an engineering manager somewhere, and my employee says, I really want an opportunity in China as a, SEO engineer or whatever. And the manager's like, I don't know what to do about that. What do they do? Do you have career coaches in HR? Do you guys look at this stuff? How do you advise these, decisions to be made?
Yeah, so the managers have access to, and we do almost everything online learning now because we operate in 190 countries. It just has to be. But they can go out and get smarter about how to have that career check-in conversation in and of itself. But like very tactically, as an example, the manager's first role is to say, well, let's go take a look at what jobs are available just and open there right now. So we have an internal jobs market, but it really is just about jobs that has more robust data than what we would have on our external site. And so the manager can then get really clear with the employee, and a key one on the technical jobs, what technologies are being built in China.
Right.
Because we don't build everything everywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it does, we built a tool 4 years ago out of my group. We prototype a lot of stuff and then we turn it over to engineering called Who Plus. And what Who Plus does is it lets you go scour through the organizational chart and look for people when you put in attributes that match what you're looking for. And so the person could put in there, China software engineering job on Azure.
I saw that when I was up there. Yeah, it's like a super duper search type people search type of tool. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so then that starts to get them down, because in the end it does come down to, do you know anybody that works in that group? So we haven't really broken that. And the interesting thing though, especially now with where our millennial and our Z employees want to go, they fundamentally believe they will probably take more jobs like that than even the Xers did. And so they are really looking for more powerful ways. And what we think we're going to go, and Josh, you and I were speaking about this, is what we're contemplating now is we may say, well, rather than change your people manager, what if we just send you on a 1-year assignment over to China? And your manager, your people manager will stay the same, but you'll have a supervisor for the work or a team leader for the work while you're over there. And what we're trying to do is reduce the amount of manager change. We're not proud of how much manager change we have, because one thing, we are very agile as a company. The problem is we really like to reorg. And so, and we find if our employees have too many managers in a short period of time, they tend to leave the company.
Yeah.
So we're looking at ways to lock them in and have that career coach. And then the last thing I would say is, both internal and external, we have career coaches. People sign up as volunteers to be career coaches, people that's where they're going to spend their discretionary free time. And then we have professional services, and employees can get online coaching to get help if they need it.
Fantastic stuff. So one more question. By the way, anybody on the webinar that would like to ask questions, just type them in and we'll try to go through them. So on the topic of learning, we kind of lost that one in the shuffle here. So, I decide I want a new role and I want to go from engineering into marketing, and I think I know the basics of marketing, but I really don't know how Microsoft does marketing because I've never done it. How do you build the learning content, and who builds it to facilitate all these wonderful growth paths?
Yeah, so we run a federated learning model. So we have learning organizations spread across the company. We all use a single LMS in the back end, though. And that's when I first got into this job, I turned off 6 other LMSs and got us onto one, because then we have the data. We have a lot of different front ends, but and we are increasingly now moving to a single front end. But the content, then we refer to it as the math department should not be writing biology classes, and biology should not be writing business classes. And so we divvy up the content depending on what learning org is the rightful writer of that content. And there is some overlap, like security is kind of a mess right now. We have a lot of people writing security content. But that cleans it up and makes the signal stronger, and also makes the discoverability better for employees as they're looking for it. And then everything is free. So, and I see the question about cost, so I'll talk about that in 1 second. But the idea that if someone wants to learn new skills, let's reduce the barriers to that. And people might be surprised. We turn on Pluralsight inside of our company. Pluralsight is a great tool for super technical people, and so we're happy to have that available to our employees. And of course, we have LinkedIn turned on, and that's where, as you go negotiate, you want to get these enterprise contracts if you can. The one question, Josh, that came up, like, what do small companies do that don't have lots of resources? We get it. That's where the example of the career development plan is just a SharePoint site. You don't always have to have fancy technology, and sometimes it's better to pilot using simpler, forms, either SharePoint or heck, you can print it out in Word, than think you have to go implement some tool. And then the other thing is, what we do is we conscript our employees to do a lot of this work. And so it isn't necessarily hiring consultants to go out and understand all your jobs. Go ask the managers to help you define them. And the manifestation of that is a well-written job description. Really simple stuff. And then if that job description really discriminates well what the work is, then you can have an employee look at that, or the AI tool if you get that far along. And because there's enough discernment in there, it can really do matching so much better.
One of the things that occurs to me after many, many years of doing all this research, Nihal's research, the conversations with you, Joe, is that a lot of this is a little simpler than you think. It is about having conversations that are well scripted with each other about development and growth, and then acting on those conversations. If those conversations don't happen, no tool is going to solve the problem.
Excellent. And just the power of showing interest in that employee or that mentee is a powerful way to engage with them and keep them engaged in their work. And at Microsoft, one of our big things around culture was, sure, we had growth mindset, but the big unlock was saying to people, what is your purpose? And with our earlier in career folks, like our university hires, we say, what are your superpowers? Because they're like, we have no idea what my purpose is. She's like, give me a break. My purpose is to get a job and eat. Yeah. I'm like, got it. Okay, well, what are your superpowers? So that conversation goes really well that way. And then other people call it passion. But what we've asked everyone to do is get really clear on what your purpose is, and then how can you align that to the company's purpose, which is our mission, so that every day when they come to work, doing these jobs and growing their careers, they feel like they are achieving their personal purpose, their personal passion, while helping the company and our customers be successful.
Well, I think if everybody asked their teammates, what is your superpower, the world would be a better place.
I agree.
So we've got a couple more minutes. Let me go back to Nihal for a second, then I'll come back to you, Joe. By the way, thank you so much for joining us. I know how busy you are. So Nihal, you've talked to hundreds of companies about this. I know how hard you worked on this. I know how interesting the data was. What would you say the biggest surprise was to you in this research that you want to point out to people that might help them learn how to move in this direction? And then Joe, I'll ask you the same question.
The biggest surprise.
I knew I'd catch you off guard since it is 1 a.m. for you.
It is 1:30 a.m. and I am just going to say that and thank you for bringing that up, Joe. I thought that was an excellent point. Josh, my birthday is coming up next week, so I think it's a good time to
Okay, we're going to talk about your career.
All right, so let me answer this in a bit of a twisted way, because what came up as the biggest surprise was not what we saw, but the degree of intensity with which we saw it. So we knew that people want to grow. We knew always that, career growth is important, but how strongly it stood out. Like, it was the number one out of all the 100 that we studied. It was among the top 5. So 5 out of the top 15 were to do with careers. So it was the intensity of how strongly it stood out. And then the other thing was, every time that, I've spoken with different audiences, and even in this conversation today, I was trying to listen from an employee perspective, a leader perspective, and also an L&D professional perspective. A lot of times, I've seen L&D professionals shrug their shoulders and say that we don't own growth. It's managers, right? Like, they do growth. And that was the thing for us, that it is no longer okay for L&D to shrug their shoulders, and it is for us to identify specific steps, and clarify what is the role of L&D. L&D cannot own growth alone. L&D has to be the facilitator. Yes, managers will always be the people closest to their people, who will know what the business needs, who will know what the aspirations of their people are, and who will know where the company needs new talent. But L&D has to be that enabler, that orchestrator, that facilitator who will do the homework, who will identify who are the mentors in the organization, who are all those people who have those skills, create that inventorization. So long answer to say, Josh, it wasn't a surprise on what we found out, because somewhere deep down you know it, but it was the intensity to which it matters right now, and it is so relevant for where we are today.
Thank you. I mean, just for those of you that don't know what that means, the way this whole process works is we get all this data, we get thousands and thousands of answers to hundreds of questions, and then we correlate them against business metrics, and these very, very highly correlated things pop out at the end. And it's always a surprise. This is why this research is so fascinating. So thank you, Nahal. It's clearly the truth. Joe, what has been the biggest surprise for you? You've been doing this for a while and been into the bowels of the details, as I have.
A couple of quick answers. One is, I think you're right, is that if you keep it simple, so we really doubled down, as people know, on the neuroscience about 6 years ago. And the more we work with it, the more we learn that the simpler we can make things and make them really relevant for the employee, the more stickiness there is and the more they get excited about it. And so, but it takes longer to get things down to simple, but take that time and pilot a lot. And then, we released this thing called team agreements, and it was a disaster. So we pulled it back in, redid it, and the new one works great. But just be willing to address your fixed mindset and say, that didn't work, we'll try again. The other big unlock was we didn't realize how much pressure the managers were feeling to think that they had to have the answers. So we said to them, you actually are not responsible for all the answers. You are responsible, though, for having a great conversation and then partnering with your employee to figure out what their career plan will look like. But don't feel that you have to know everything. And that really was, that pressure valve release really helped them out. And then with the employees, we said to them, look, for learning, it isn't necessarily finding time and space for learning anymore. It really is, in the modern, now this digital age we're in, is learning all the time. So be constantly asking yourself, are you learning something new? Are you really pushing yourself into that performance zone? And just get excited that the new world of work is going to be ruled by those who really are recreating themselves all the time.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Nahal. One reflection just on this issue of managers not having to solve the problem. When I was at Deloitte, Bill Pelster, who's now my business partner here, was actually my career advisor. In the first year I was at Deloitte, I was completely a duck out of water. I didn't know what to do there. I was completely confused as to how the company worked, and he had no answers for me at all. And then within about 6 to 9 months, he said, I think I found something for you to do. You're going to lead this human capital trends research project. And the next 6 years at Deloitte were fantastic. But I had to wait a while for him to figure out what would work for me and get to know me, and for me to get to know him. And it worked out great. So, I think that's a really good lesson. It's that we don't expect managers to have all the answers, but at least they have to listen and work on it with the people. Okay, Joe, thank you. I really appreciate you taking time with us. We greatly admire the work you do. Nahal, this was a fantastic presentation, and we love this research, of course. And all of you that are here, if there are any questions you didn't answer, let us know. There'll be a replay of this, or contact us if you'd like to go through the assessment yourself.